Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to talk with you this afternoon about information sharing, and thanks for the intro, Lisa. It's good to see you again. And thank you to USGIF. So what I'd like to talk to you about a little this afternoon is the mission of my organization and how it intersects with the geospatial community and is enabled by geospatial technologies. So obviously our vision is national security through responsible information sharing. And I'll talk a little about what that means. We were created, similar to what Dave Alexander just told you about, under the Intelligence Reform and Terrorism Prevention Act of 2004 in response to the terrorist attacks of 9/11. And we were supposed to improve information sharing to protect the American people and prevent harm. That's our core reason for existence. But we're not an operational unit, so we're very much in the business of planning, managing, coordinating, overseeing, and reporting. But everything we get done is done through partners, which I've heard quite a bit about here this week, that a lot of the organizations represented here and the companies here are working much more openly in public-private partnerships, and that has always been our model. So the Congress envisioned something they called the information sharing environment as the means to achieve these objectives. And it's simply the combination of the organizations, the people, the programs of those organizations, the systems, and the data that all come together to enable information sharing. It would be an ecosystem in current jargon. And the responsible part of information sharing is about providing the right information to the right people in the right form at the right time to enable them to do their jobs better and faster and cheaper and easier. It applies to both open data as well as sensitive, classified, and controlled information. And so it equally implies preventing unauthorized access, and I'm going to talk a little more about that. The whole foundation of responsible information sharing is a reciprocal trust model. You can simplify it to two people. I have information you want, you have information I want. What's it going to take for me to give you yours, give you mine, and get you to give me yours? There's a reciprocal trust model underlying this that says, I need to know what you want from me. I need to know what you're going to do with it. I need to know how you're going to use it, how you're going to protect it. And if you give it to somebody else, what are they going to do with it? And there's an underpinning of policies and agreements and compliance mechanisms that can actually reinforce and enable this reciprocal trust model, because too many times it's just an ad hoc, one-on-one, person-to-person relationship business. And that's not a scalable model, because we're talking millions of people across the country and they have to join this for it to be effective, and they can't all know each other personally. One of the things that's come out is that underlying all of this that makes it a challenge in this country is the foundational constitutional rights to privacy and civil rights and civil liberties. And that is so embedded and so important. You heard it from Mike Rogers this morning from NSA, that it's one of the 5 main priorities established by the president in instituting this information sharing environment. But what we found is that agreements between organizations were so hard, they took so long, they were so complex, that they were hindering information sharing. So we pulled together a team of privacy experts over the course of the last year and fairly recently published on our website, ise.gov, a framework for embedding privacy protections into information sharing agreements, because we hope that's going to help people be able to set them up faster, get that out of the way, and get on with information sharing rather than having a lawyer fight for the next 2 years. So the scope of the mission that we were given runs across 5 communities in law: law enforcement, defense, intelligence, homeland security, and foreign affairs. It's interesting and challenging because it goes federal as well as state and local government, private sector, tribal, and international partners. The thing I would highlight in this diagram for the companies present is the recognition of the foundational reliance we have on the technology industry to actually make any of this happen. Because all of us in here are going to get our information sharing repositories and systems and tools from the industry types of companies that are represented here today. So if you think about that for this community being a geospatial underlayment, that's a critical and essential aspect to the information sharing environment. So when we talk to any of those constituencies I talked about, the communities, other countries, state government. There's a fairly common set of challenges across the top of this slide, and we think some national approaches that can help confront them effectively. Everybody's talking about declining resources. Everybody's talking about rapidly changing, evolving, and emerging threats. We heard yesterday from General McChrystal how the old traditional hierarchical model and business processes are not responsive enough, not agile enough to cope effectively with those threats. So what does it take to make this work? And what does it take to make it work when we're talking about 18,000 police departments across the country being one constituency in here, and all the federal agencies being another constituency? And I learned recently that there's over 20 million businesses in this country that all potentially could be players and participants in this. How do you actually involve that many disparate interests and organizations effectively together? Obviously a collaborative approach, obviously public-private partnerships. One of the things we really try to promote is standards-based interoperability solutions for information exchange. It will not work to monolithically mandate a single solution, single approach across that kind of landscape of interests. How many companies are in this building today? What we need is the means for those systems to express information in a form that's rapidly ingestible by the recipients, analyzable, product produce, actions taken very quickly. So in our organization, we're working under 2 national strategies right now to promote information sharing on a set of 6 priority areas that fit in that mission scope. And I would argue that every single one of them have geospatial aspects, potential uses, and in many cases already are being, geospatial technologies are being applied for the benefit of the program capabilities, but more can be done in every single case. The first one was state and regional information sharing. Really falls into the law enforcement, homeland security space. Anybody's heard the term intelligence-led policing or intelligence-based policing? It's crime pattern analysis. Where and when do criminal activities happen? Because all the police departments in the country will tell you they can't cover every street corner all the time. And they have proven by the application of geospatial pattern analysis that they can very effectively deploy and disrupt patterns of crime by that analysis. Cybersecurity, we already heard about the cyber-physical nexus. There's a lot of really interesting combination capabilities of using traditional IT network analysis in combination with geophysical, spatial, and temporal analysis to enrich the cyber virtual world and analytic capabilities. Watch listing, screening, and encounters is our traditional core CT mission space. It's obvious that you need to know where the known or suspected terrorists are, where they're trying to travel, what they're trying to do. It's inherently a geospatial analytical problem. Domain awareness is kind of interesting. It's a complex, there's substructure in there. When we heard about the critical infrastructure sectors earlier today, every one of those sectors has a potential domain awareness. Maritime domain is the one that we see has sort of the prominent leading exemplar implementation of interoperability standards. Data architecture, I was fortunate to go to a conference in Portugal last month, and one of the highest interests they had was the ability to do international sharing on a standards basis around the maritime domain to keep track of ships, people, cargo, and movement patterns. Transnational organized crime, probably not a surprise to anybody. We want to know where the criminals are, where the guns are going, where the drugs are going, where the human trafficking is going, where the vehicle smuggling is going. Again, it's another geospatial analytical problem. And then incident management. You heard from Dave Alexander just recently, right before me, how critical it is if you can imagine going either into a natural disaster, like the one we had here last night, or a man-made active shooter event, that type of thing. If the information is available to first responders, they can literally save their own lives or yours or mine. But it's got to be in a form that's readily available, easily understood, rapid access, reliable access, and same issue again of authentication and access. You can't let people who do not belong in that information have access to it. So doing those 2 things together is really important. We talk about responsible sharing. It's about provisioning the people that have a need to know and a right to use the information, and as strongly preventing unauthorized access, disruption to that information, or misuse. So the value proposition we've made, and I think we're starting to deliver on, is if we can aggregate the customer demand to a common set of requirements, there's a benefit to the customer and there's a benefit to the solution providers, because we can express the information sharing requirements consistently across the users. We can create an economy of scale opportunity for the markets. How many companies want to continue doing RFP after RFP to not get awarded something? Wouldn't you really rather build something once and sell it 20 times? What we get out of it is if we do these two things well, aggregate the customer requirements, translate them into technical specifications that can be procured, that the industry advises us are feasible and deliverable, then both sides benefit. And we buy interoperability off the shelf because it's baked into the solutions. It's not an afterthought that's cobbled in, added on at greater expense, and doesn't ever really work. As a former deputy CIO for the US, the thing that just drives me crazy is the amount of money we have invested and continue to invest every year in information technology and the untapped potential of the really valuable asset, which is the data that those systems house. And every time you reuse it, its return on investment goes up. The value to everybody benefiting from it goes up. We have to unleash that potential. So to do that, we formed something called the Standards Coordinating Council, because what we were finding was one organization, lots of people, lots of companies here work with OGC. Great for geospatial standards. And a lot of people in the law enforcement community work with the IGES Institute for Justice Information Systems. And then other people work with the Object Management Group standards, and other people work with OASIS standards. And what we found was there's a meta-standard problem. They weren't necessarily compatible with each other. And everybody that was buying solutions that were compliant with one set of standards was bumping their heads up against interoperability problems with the others. We've brought them together. The URL on the page, they have established, it's a public-private partnership. So we have federal agencies in here, we have standards development organizations in here, and we have tech industry associations in here. So for the geo companies, we're looking very strongly at Open Geospatial Consortium as the geo community interface for us. And their membership in this organization, they are expected to communicate back to the geo industry opportunities, needs, and help engage the community in moving this agenda forward. So what are they working on? We were charged, actually challenged by the GAO to create an enterprise architecture for information sharing for the nation. And we said, wait a minute, 18,000 police departments, how many federal agencies? They're not all going to build to a single unified enterprise architecture. The GAO came back and said, okay, what do you propose instead? We said, what about an interoperability framework where we can enable all of these different systems to exchange information with each other without forcing any given solution down anybody's throat? And they accepted that. We designed an information interoperability framework with a bunch of architects, and then we decomposed the pieces parts into this thing we're calling Project Interoperability. And it's the combination of the technology type tools you see down the right-hand side, which we found from kind of a set of common patterns were repeat problems. Everybody that has any kind of information that has sensitivity that needs access control has to have some kind of identity credential and access management solution. We all need some kind of data tagging that enables the policies to authorize the credentials to access those that may and prevent access from those that may not. The common profile, you'll see GEO in there as a capability, the National Information Exchange Model as an approach. Those were the tech tools. Equally important are the ones across the bottom, which are the managerial challenges. Some people, it's kind of trite to say, well, the technology solutions are all known, the people problems are the hard ones. It's a little bit oversimplified. Any one of these things, if you don't have effective governance, you can have the most wonderful tech solution in the world, it won't matter. Nobody will implement it. If you can't budget for it and resource it and deliver it, it won't matter. If nobody knows about it because you don't have effective stakeholder engagement and customer outreach, it won't matter. The point is that any one of these can be the Achilles heel, but a holistic solution that addresses them all can actually deliver. So we are asking that Standards Coordinating Council with their website, with their customers, with their projects to line up their solutions and give back, pay it forward. Each time they implement one of these things and deliver it back to the knowledge repository, we get a reference implementation of the national architecture framework that turns it from conceptual design into real, reusable, best practice proven solutions that we want people to contribute to. If you're interested in that, we did put it up on GitHub on purpose as an open opportunity for collaboration and comment. We'd love to hear what people think about it. One of the challenges for us is we are also legally expected to cause sharing not just within domains, not just between those different organizations we talked about, but actually cross-domain sharing as well. This is another one where tech solutions really are proven. Organizations like DoD have cross-domain, security domain, exchange capabilities and technical infrastructures. This one has a set of policy and procedure challenges around it. We've proven with identity, credential, and access management and attribute exchanges that it is possible to automate authorized and authenticated information exchanges. One of the projects we invested in the GEO arena was the GEO for NIEM initiative, GEO for NIEM. That was done with DHS. It was done with the Open Geospatial Consortium, participation of the FGDC. Just last month, actually earlier this month, OGC demonstrated on their testbed project out in Boulder, Colorado, the successful conclusion of that project. So we now have bidirectional sharing of NIEM-based exchanges in XML with geospatial markup language at the tech level. Okay, so what does that matter? All of our law enforcement guys have been working for years in NIEM-based exchanges that now want to bring in geospatial capabilities, can combine those kinds of information seamlessly on the wire. So they can take geospatial information, non-geospatial as long as it's taggable, and integrate it and get a much better analytic capability. DoD, just 2 years ago, adopted a NIEM first policy for all of their information sharing exchanges, and they work in about half a dozen of the different NIEM domains. So now they'll have the geospatial capability with those different communities for information exchange as well. It's no news to this audience that the range of capabilities present and in the future in geospatial technologies are just exploding. They're impressive. There's some really cool evolutions going on in things like the Internet of Things that are taking the next step beyond social media, beyond media, mobile and cloud in the next generation technology. But they also present some really serious challenges. Every one of these new capabilities brings on a new set of vulnerabilities and threats. And this is where I do my CIO, Chief Security Officer pause. Having lived through the WikiLeaks and Snowden era, having been responsible for mitigating data breaches in the agency where I was a CIO, the caution I would offer to the geospatial community, and I actually used to be in it, and I used to do this, I would point my finger at the CIO and the CISO and say, but for those guys, I could deliver to you everything you ever wanted from the geo world. It's those guys that are standing in my way. And then I got promoted and I became one of those guys. And I found out pointing the finger at each other and blaming security for the reason you can't deliver geo capabilities, or geo complaining that, or CIOs and CISOs complaining that geo was the unacceptable risk driver. Doesn't matter to the mission. In the end, you're not delivering for them, and it just looks like a blame game. We really need to be cognizant of baking in, and this is our theme in responsible sharing, that information assurance and cybersecurity we need to deliver all those capabilities are built in as part and parcel of the projects from day one, every time from now on. It's no news to anybody here that we're facing an increasingly challenging cyber world, not just from external threats, but internal as well. We have got to figure out some way that we actually meet mission and deliver capabilities with security and information assurance built in. So the last thing I'd like to talk to you about is this reference architecture. Underneath the federal enterprise architecture, and if you're affiliated with DoD, the DODAF, and underneath our information sharing architecture, that interoperability framework on the right, there are some subs. If you remember on the project interoperability slide, there were things like ICAM. It has its own architecture. Data aggregation has its own subordinate architecture. Geo is a complex enough domain that it has its own subordinate reference architecture. What we've done is take a set of its framework, really. People tell me, don't say reference architecture, even though that's the acronym, because it's not a fully technically specified reference architecture. It's a framework. It's got governance, business process, data, application services, security, standards-based interoperability, and performance reference subcomponents. What we're really looking for is people to try this out. We rolled it out. It was developed intergovernment, interagency-wise. It was socialized with OGC, and we rolled it out at the Geospatial World Forum last month. And we're now asking for people to test drive. Take a look at it, try it out, and give feedback, as well as if you're interested and you want to contribute and participate through OGC with the Standards Coordinating Council, any reference implementations of any parts of it will be really welcome. So with that, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Okay, we have them rolling in, even as I speak. Thank you. All right, let's kick this one off with a little bit of an international challenge. You noted increasing collaboration and sharing for maritime domain awareness. In view of challenges shown by the Malaysian Airlines incident, where do you see air domain collaboration going? Mm-hmm.
Well, in the intelligence community, there is an equivalent function to maritime for air domain. It was only recently transferred, actually, to be under the direction of the Air Force going forward. We see it as an area that's getting increased leadership attention. It has many of the same features and challenges that the maritime domain faced, and we're really hopeful that they will be able to accelerate their progress based on the successful governance and standards and architecture models that the maritime domain has already developed. So they shouldn't have to suffer and start from scratch. They should be able to jumpstart on that.
Okay, I'm going to combine two that came in because they're a little bit related. Given the number of partners in ISE, you must deal with huge quantities of information. How are you approaching big data challenges? And then a follow-on to that, how does all of this relate to eyesight?
Okay. So I'm actually going to take the last one first. If you remember the cube slide, the intelligence community is one of the 5 domains that is member of the information sharing environment writ large. So we look at eyesight as the future architecture and the integration of the 17 intelligence components of the U.S. government under the OD&I as the IC's IT platform for information sharing. And they're actually leading the way in many areas. That Geo for NEAM example that was just piloted by OGC embedded the data encoding standards from eyesight into their capabilities, so they actually have geo data object level control now for authentication and access that was built on the IC data standards. So that's kind of an example. Big data is no more special or different for this community than it is for any other, for the ISE than it is for any other potential use. It faces a lot of the same challenges about, do people actually have the infrastructure? Do they actually have the data scientists and the skills to process? Do they have the training and the workforce enabled to take advantage of the potential? I think because of the fracturing and fragmentation, the one extra challenge the ISE has is if you think about every member participating organization having their own big data, how do you bring the interoperability and sharing between the big data clouds into this environment is the one extra thing that's unique to us. And the only way we know to cope with that kind of stuff is through these standards-based exchanges. Whatever comes out of your cloud that needs to come to mine has got to be standards compliant, so it's machine ingestible, and we minimize the amount of human intervention and reprocessing of data to make it useful on the receiving end.
Okay, this next question is going to test your knowledge of cyber acronyms, because I really don't understand this one, but we're going to throw it out there. How does ISE integrate with JSAOs, JSACs for common cybersecurity standards like STIX and TAX2 for cyber threat information sharing?
Okay, so it's STIX and TAX-E. Is
Okay.
Taxi, yeah. So it's interesting that you ask. DHS is nominally in the lead. There's about a three-part answer here. We've been working with the 5 federal centers on the son of CNCI 5, which is about connecting the federal centers for enhanced shared situational awareness on cyber threats. They put together an enhanced shared situational awareness, ESSA, information sharing architecture, ISA, and have built use cases and a bunch of stuff for the feds to work together. The president issued 2 different executive orders last year and this year that say we've got to, as a federal government, enhance the sharing of that information with the private sector because, as we already heard, most of the critical infrastructure that's under attack is under private ownership and operation, but it's essential to the society and economic function of the United States. The STIX and TAXI protocol, STIX is for cyber threat information data exchange, TAXI is the transport protocol. DHS has taken that into OASIS to take it to an international standards body and have a standard for the nation for cyber threat information sharing that was piloted using the financial services sector as a willing guinea pig and MITRE as the developer. There's a parallel effort going on with the object management group for an integrated threat and risk model. So STIX and TAXI is a great cyber threat information sharing model that hopefully will get broadly adopted with the new information sharing and analysis organizations called for in the executive order, in combination with this multi-standard exchange model that's going to be coming out from the object management group.
Okay, moving right along. 2-part question again. Apparently, audience loves these 2-part ones. So, how has attending GEOINT 2015 Symposium so far helped ISE? And how would these off-the-shelf solutions be available and to whom?
Okay, so the first part, what I've heard from the luminaries that have already spoken here is a bunch of reinforcement of the mission and priorities and approach that we're taking. When we hear about public-private partnership, openness, transparency, collaboration, you just nailed our model. It literally will not work without those things. So having the senior leaders of the agencies in the geospatial arena stand up and say, this is where we're going, gives me hope that this isn't just shelfware and concepts, this is real and it's doable. The second question?
Okay, and this is, I'm reading straight from the card. How would these off-the-shelf solutions, off-the-shelf in quotation marks, be available and to whom?
So one of the things underlying that value proposition slide is the notion that if there are standards, and if we say they will be built by the customers in coordination with the providers, the developers, via the standards development organizations, the next step is to go into acquisition and to say, because we have proven that these are acceptable to the community, they're developable, they're deliverable, then we will bake them into either procurements as a requirement, that's how we get interoperability off the shelf, or when we do grants to states. We already do this on some areas, grants from Homeland Security or FBI or DHS, DOJ that go to the states have terms and conditions of taking federal money. One of them was you must have privacy policies to protect personally identifiable information in the fusion centers in the states that receive any federal funding. We would expect grant language or contract language to put this in as a requirement, and it would just be features that we get in the solutions that are vended off the shelf.
Okay, if we could just have a round of applause for Mike Howell. Thank you.